I thought it was just another quiet morning on my mountain, until I rode up the North Ridge and found a luxury cottage sitting dead center on my land. No permit, no notice, no jurisdiction. So, I documented everything. And by sunset, that illegal house was rubble. And the HOA president who built it came screaming up the trail in a Porsche, waving fake contracts and dragging hired muscle behind her. They thought they were intimidating a local. They didn't realize they'd just declared war on a state attorney. Most stories don't begin with sirens or lawsuits. Most begin quietly, soft as morning light, subtle as pine smoke drifting off a cold roof. Mine began with stillness, the kind of morning that feels like the world finally remembered how to breathe. The sun was pushing through the pines, warming the frost one silver bead at a time. The air tasted like cold stone and clean sap, and the workshop behind me still smelled of walnut shavings from the desk I'd sanded yesterday, one of those honest scents that settles deep in your bones. Ellie handed me a thermos of coffee strong enough to restart a dead truck battery. Right before I stepped out, she gave me that "don't chase raccoons again" look. She's wiser than me, and she knows the woods tend to steal my attention. My plan was simple: ride the ATV up toward the North Ridge, check a few boundary markers, clear whatever winter storms had knocked down, and be home before lunch. But halfway up the ridge, something caught the corner of my eye. A flash, too straight, too polished, too deliberate to belong in a place built by wind and time. The engine of the ATV slowed under my hand without me telling it to. Instinct tugged harder than thought. I killed the engine and listened. No chainsaws, no generators, no voices, just the old mountain breathing. I stepped forward, boots brushing through pine needles. The trees opened, and my stomach dropped clean through me. There, perched boldly on my slope, stood a structure so out of place it almost looked photoshopped into the forest. A wraparound deck, stone columns, wide, floor-to-ceiling windows, fresh sawdust dusting the porch like powdered sugar. It wasn't a shack, it wasn't a hunting cabin. It was a magazine cover, a glossy fantasy home planted dead center in real wilderness. You don't need a map to know when something is wrong, but I checked anyway. GPS, parcel overlays, digital boundary pins, I've triple verified over 20 years of ownership. No mistake, no ambiguity. The house wasn't near my land. It wasn't brushing against a property line someone misread. It was inside my land, deep inside, built like the mountain belonged to someone else entirely. But I didn't shout, didn't stomp up to the front door, didn't demand answers from empty windows. No, I did what a state attorney does when the world stops making sense. I gathered evidence. Panic makes you messy, procedure makes you lethal, and something told me this wasn't a harmless misunderstanding. This was the opening move of a much bigger fight, one they had no idea they were about to lose. I'm not an impulsive man. 20 years of living on this mountain and a career in the law before that taught me that the truth doesn't panic and the ground never lies. So I stood there for a long moment, letting the scene settle into my mind the way a judge settles into a verdict. The luxury cottage didn't just exist on my land, it announced itself. It had the arrogance of something built by people who'd never once asked permission from anyone in their lives. The morning sun caught the glass, throwing a bright reflection across the slope. For a second, it looked like a signal mirror, something you'd use in the wilderness when you're lost. Except the only thing lost here was whoever thought they could hide an entire house from the man who owned the mountain. I walked forward slowly, boots crunching on the gravel the builders had spread for their convenience. Even that angered me, not the gravel itself, but the idea that someone had prepared a work site here, planned it, cut into the ground, leveled it, delivered materials, all without me ever hearing a whisper. That takes time, that takes confidence, and confidence takes motive. As I circled the structure, the details sharpened. The wraparound deck wasn't just decorative, it was reinforced. The stone columns were real stone, not veneer. The windows were custom, the kind designed to hold heat in winter and mountain air in summer. This wasn't some shack hammered together by a weekend warrior. It was engineered, financed, scheduled, meaning someone invested serious money into putting it exactly where it didn't belong. I stepped onto the unfinished deck. The boards were new. I could still smell the resin. The whole place had that raw, half-complete energy, the kind construction sites have just before the finishing crews arrive with tile samples and overpriced lighting fixtures. There were no furniture, No personal items, no indications anyone had stayed here, just the bones of a wealthy person's fantasy. I pushed open the door. It wasn't even locked. Inside, sawdust hung in the air like a pale mist. Electrical wires curled out from open junction boxes. Cabinets lay in cardboard boxes along the wall. Somebody had big plans for this place. But the detail that caught my attention first wasn't the room, or the workmanship, or even the size. It was the silence. A silence that didn't belong to the forest, but to a work crew that had disappeared fast. No tools left behind, no water bottles, no portable generator, no contractor marks, nothing. Like someone told them to pack up and vanish yesterday. And that's when I noticed the tire tracks leading away from the back. Fresh. Deep. Probably from a trailer or equipment hauler. Whoever built this didn't just break the law, they ran from it. I pulled out my phone, opened my bookmarked GIS overlay, and zoomed in. The parcel boundaries glowed in red lines. My property stretched across the ridge like a long spine, every contour and angle familiar to me. The dot representing my position sat squarely, almost insultingly, inside my land. Not on the border, not near a surveying error, dead center. There is a specific kind of anger that comes from seeing someone lay claim to what you've bled for. But anger is a poor tool. Documentation, on the other hand, that's a scalpel. I started recording. North Ridge, 10:14 a.m., structure located approximately 47 miles inside property line. My voice was steady, even calm. Ellie always says my legal tone sounds like a man sharpening a blade, and she's probably right. As I narrated, something unexpected crept into my thoughts. Whoever built this wasn't trying to be discreet. This wasn't tucked behind trees or nestled in a hollow. No, this stood in an open clearing, bold, proud, like it belonged there. It reminded me of something we saw often in court. The confidence of someone who believes consequences are for other people. I ended the recording, pocketed my phone, and took a long breath of cold air. Someone had declared something by building here. A statement, a warning, or maybe a test. Whatever it wasn't accidental, and it certainly wasn't legal. Before heading back to meet Ellie, I glanced once more at the structure. Bright wood, shining glass, standing like a monument to entitlement. A beautiful house, yes, but beauty doesn't justify trespass, and the mountain doesn't negotiate. I've always believed there are two kinds of responses to crisis: emotion or procedure. Emotion burns fast. Procedure wins cases. When I texted Ellie, "Come to the North Ridge, bring the drone," she didn't ask a single question. Her reply came in 4 seconds. "On my way." Most people marry for romance. I married the only woman I've ever met who could cross-examine a tree stump. While waiting, I walked the perimeter of the structure, taking photos, marking distances, logging timestamp after timestamp. It wasn't nerves, it was discipline. The same discipline that carried me through the years of litigation and land use cases. The mountain rewards people who pay attention. By the time Ellie's SUV climbed the ridge, the sun had settled high enough to put the house in full display. Every beam and window catching the light like a mirror meant to provoke. She stepped out, took one long look, and said with calm annoyance, "Someone's made a very expensive mistake." I handed her my GPS overlays. She reviewed them with her jaw set. Straight, sharp, resolute. "Coordinates match," she said. "Structure is inside your parcel, entirely. Mark, this isn't even close." She lifted the drone case onto the hood and began calibrating. Her hands moved with the precision of someone who'd filed thousands of court exhibits. The drone rose into the air, slicing through the silence. As it began circling the structure, Ellie narrowed her eyes at the monitor. "Mark, look at the stumps." I stepped beside her. On the screen, 3 clean-cut stumps. Not fallen trees, not storm damage. Old-growth oaks, trees that had been here long before I ever was. "They cut down your oaks," Ellie said, voice tight. "For that deck. That's timber trespass. Treble damages." I felt something low in my chest tighten. Cutting trees on my land wasn't just illegal, it was personal. Trees like that take a century to grow and 5 minutes of arrogance to destroy. The drone continued its sweep, capturing every angle, every stump, every board. Ellie adjusted the altitude and said softly, "This wasn't rushed. They planned it." I stepped in front of the house as she positioned the drone to face me. It hovered like a mechanical witness. This was the moment to establish the foundation of the legal record, what attorneys call statement of fact, under contemporaneous observation. So, I spoke clearly, my voice firm, steady, carrying the weight of oath without needing one. My name is Mark Hale. I am the sole legal owner of Parcel ID 44902 North Ridge Sector. Today is October 14th. The structure behind me is a trespass. It is unauthorized. It is unpermitted. And it is sitting on private land documented by Deed Book 12, page 405. Ellie held the drone steady as I walked past the deck, pointing out markers. This land has been surveyed 5 times, 2003, 2009, 2014, 2018, and 21. All surveys confirm identical boundaries. No easements, no encroachments, no recorded permissions. I let the silence rest a moment before finishing. If I am wrong, I will take responsibility, but I am not wrong. Ellie lowered the drone, reviewed the footage again, and exhaled slowly, a controlled, deliberate release of breath. This wasn't a misunderstanding, she said. Someone invested time, money, and labor into building something they knew wasn't theirs. I nodded. Then we're not dealing with confusion. We're dealing with intent. She slipped her hand into mine, not for comfort, but solidarity. Let's keep documenting, she said. We build this case right at the first time. And as the drone lifted again, catching the house, the stumps, and the boundary in one sweeping arc, I felt the familiar shift inside me, the quiet click of gears aligning. The moment when a mountain resident becomes a state attorney again. Not emotional, not rattled, just precise. Whoever built this place didn't just trespass. They'd handed me the opening argument. There's a moment, right after understanding becomes certainty, when the path forward appears with painful, perfect clarity. That's where I stood now, not emotional, not rattled, just prepared. After Ellie confirmed the footage, I called Joe. He answered with his usual calm. You want me to bring tools? He asked. Bring the excavator trailer. No argument, just trust. Then I called Tom. When I described the situation, he went quiet, not confused, not shocked, just calculating. You want it down today? He asked. If the law supports immediate abatement. It will, he said. I'll bring the grade kit. Ellie glanced at me. You're calling them in fast. No, I said. I'm calling in the truth. By the time Joe's diesel growl came up the ridge, the sun was bright enough to erase every shadow beneath the deck. Tom arrived seconds later, stepping out with the slow, deliberate posture of a man who has seen structures fail and knows exactly how they fail. He didn't waste time on the view. He walked straight to the nearest support post, crouched, brushed aside some loose dirt, and frowned. Tom kicked the soil near the footing, then straightened slowly, jaw tightening. Mark, he said, come look at this. I stepped beside him. He pointed with 2 fingers, tapping the concrete with a knuckle. Shallow pour, less than 8 inches, no rebar, sitting on loose fill, looks like they used whatever dirt they scraped off the slope. He exhaled sharply. This isn't a house, Tom said. It's a gravity trap. He walked to the deck beams, eyeballing the load path, shaking his head. One heavy snow load on that roof, and this entire deck shears off. If anyone was standing under it, they'd be dead. Joe let out a low whistle. Ellie's eyes narrowed with quiet fury. Not theatrical, but intentional. Illegal was one thing. Deadly was another. Now, immediate abatement wasn't just legally sound, it was necessary. Joe dusted his hands and looked at me. So, what's the plan, boss? This was the moment most people misunderstand about lawyers. They think law is made of paper. But, in the field, law is made of instructions. I turned toward the team, the ridge behind us, the illegal house in front of us, and spoke with the tone that had once guided junior attorneys and rookie deputies alike. Gentlemen, listen up. Both men stopped moving. Under the doctrine of abatement, we are authorized to remove this hazard. It is unpermitted, it is a trespass, and it poses immediate structural risk. Joe nodded. Tom folded his arms. Ellie lifted the drone. Document everything, I continued. No shortcuts, no assumptions. Safety first. Do not touch the trees. They're evidence for timber trespass. I pointed toward the deck. Start with the deck. Slow, controlled removal. We proceed methodically. No debris thrown downhill. Tom adjusted his cap. Copy that. We'll take it apart like it's a live training exercise. Joe cracked his knuckles. Let's make it clean. There was no drama, no shouting, no swagger, just three people who understood the mountain, the law, and each other. Ellie pressed the drone's record button. Ready, she said softly. Joe climbed the ladder into the excavator. Tom checked the bucket pivot on his machine. The engines rumbled like distant thunder. I felt the certainty settle into me again. Cold, steady, righteous. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't anger. This was procedure. And procedure, when you understand it the way a state attorney does, is lethal. Demolition isn't chaos when it's done by men who respect weight, gravity, and consequence. It's choreography, slow, deliberate, controlled. And as Joe eased the excavator's boom forward, that's exactly what it felt like. A grim ballet set against pine, stone, and morning air. The bucket hovered for a moment, as if asking the mountain permission. Then Joe lowered it, gentle, careful, just enough force to test the structure. The wood answered with a long, tired groan, a sound that carried years of weather the structure would never survive. Tom positioned his smaller excavator toward the rear, voice calm and steady. Feather it, Joe. Let the beams tell you where they want to break. Crack. The first beam surrendered exactly where Tom predicted. Another shift. Another deep fracture. Above us, Ellie steered the drone in slow, sweeping arcs, capturing every angle, the structure weakening, the ground shifting, the evidence forming in real time. Joe adjusted the bucket and tapped a section of the wall to open a gap for controlled collapse. He wasn't swinging wildly. He was performing surgery. But the next touch of the bucket did something none of us expected. The drywall split, not in a violent crash, just a hard, sharp snap as the bucket skimmed across the panel. The thud of broken gypsum echoed across the ridge. A cloud of pale dust erupted into the air, swirling in the sunlight like mist. Joe froze the boom immediately, his instincts as a lifelong operator kicking in. Tom shouted, "Hold up, Joe! Hold up!" I stepped closer, covering my mouth against the drifting dust. As the cloud settled, a glint appeared behind the torn panel, something metallic, catching the light like a small beacon inside the wall studs. Tom dropped from his cab and jogged over, eyes locked on the gleam. He crouched, brushed aside a chunk of drywall, and revealed it fully. A steel utility box, built into the frame, intentionally hidden. Tom tapped it with a knuckle. Someone didn't want this found. Ellie lowered the drone to hover behind us, recording everything. Tom pulled his multi-tool and began backing out the screws, careful, methodical, treating the box like evidence rather than scrap. When he lifted the lid, the metal creaked softly. Inside lay a folder, thin, crisp, spotless, too clean for a construction site, too deliberate to be forgotten. I took it from him and opened it. Sketches, blueprint fragments, lot outlines, expansion plans. Not just for the house, for the ridge. 3 directional arrows extended outward, marking additional structures, paths, decking. At the bottom corner, written in confident pen strokes, Phase 2, HOA Expansion Initiative. Ellie inhaled sharply. They weren't just building illegally, she said. They were planning to grow illegally. Tom gave a humorless huff. Well, the foundation wouldn't have survived Phase 1. I slipped the documents into a plastic evidence bag I always kept in my ATV kit, a habit left over from years handling land disputes. This isn't just trespass, I said quietly. This is premeditated annexation. Joe, still waiting in the cab with the boom raised, called out, "You clear to keep going, Mark?" I nodded. "Proceed. Controlled removal. Same plan." He eased the bucket downward again. The deck surrendered in slow, heavy breaths, each beam folding into itself, each collapse captured by Ellie's hovering drone. This was no tantrum, no anger, no impulse. This was correction. The Porsche looked wrong on that ridge, too polished, too low, too convinced the world should clear a path for it. It crawled across the uneven ground with the indignation of a pampered animal forced into the wild. The engine cut, and before the dust settled, the driver door flung open. She stepped out like the mountain had personally offended her. Platinum bob, beige pantsuit, oversized sunglasses, and heels, actual heels, sinking helplessly into pine needles. I didn't know her name yet, but every HOA has one. Her gaze swept the scene, the half-collapsed deck, the excavators, the dust still drifting like smoke. the men standing where her fantasy home used to be. Her face tightened, disbelief freezing into fury. She pointed at me like the mountain suddenly had a villain. "What?" she snapped. "The hell do you think you're doing?" I lifted my thermos, took a calm sip, and let silence do the work. People like her hate silence. It gives them time to hear themselves. "Good afternoon," I said. "Are you lost?" Her jaw clenched. "Lost? Lost? This?" She swung her arm dramatically toward the ruined deck. "This is my property!" Joe leaned out of the excavator cab, eyebrows raised. Tom crossed his arms, watching her with the patience of a man who had outlived louder storms. I didn't raise my voice. "Ma'am," I said evenly, "this structure is on my land." Her laugh was sharp, brittle. "That's impossible," she said. "We had full HOA approval. I'm the president. I authorized this development." Ellie, holding the drone controller, didn't even look up. "Your HOA stops half a mile downhill," she said matter-of-factly. "You're far outside your jurisdiction." Karen ripped off her sunglasses, as though that alone might make boundaries move. "I have documentation," she insisted. "This land was approved for expansion. You can't tear down private property." I gestured toward the half-fallen wall. "Private property requires legal property," I said. "This isn't." She marched toward me, heels wobbling dangerously. "You stop this right now," she ordered. "If you don't, I will have you arrested." Tom snorted softly. "Arrested for what? Standing on his own land?" Karen turned on him like a cat hissing at a bear. "And who are you?" "Guy who knows a collapse hazard when he sees one," Tom replied calmly. "And your house here was about to kill somebody." Karen waved him off with a scoff. Then she spun back toward me, eyes blazing. "This home cost over $600,000, she hissed. "You're going to pay for every inch." I didn't blink. "No," I said. "You are." Her breath caught, not because she was scared, but because she was unused to losing ground. Ellie spoke up then, steady as a scalpel. "We have GPS overlays. We have drone footage. We have the deed. We have the cut stumps from your illegal tree removal, and we have your hidden Phase 2 expansion plans." Karen went still. Her lips parted slightly, just enough to show she recognized the noose tightening. You can't prove anything," she said, but the fire in her voice flickered. Ellie angled the drone toward her. "Everything you say is being recorded." Karen's expression twisted, the face of someone who'd built her life on intimidation and suddenly discovered the audience had changed. Then, in a burst of panic, she stormed to her Porsche, yanked open the door, and snatched her phone. Her voice hit the ridge like a cold blade. "You're done. I'm calling the sheriff, and I'm calling my husband." That last word carried weight. Not affection, but power. Political connections. Money. Muscle. She paced in sharp, agitated lines, spitting half-sentences into the phone. Joe looked at me. Tom looked at me. "Well?" Tom asked. I shrugged. "We keep going," I said. "She's not the last storm coming up this ridge." And as if the mountain wanted to confirm it, a new rumble echoed from the trail below, heavier, deeper, purposeful. Not the sheriff, not a neighbor, something else entirely, something coming straight for us. The rumble grew louder, not the rattle of a local pickup, not the tone of county equipment, but something heavier, smoother, wrapped in money and bad decisions. A black Chevrolet Tahoe burst into view, its grille catching the sunlight like polished teeth. It bounced over the rocks with the confidence of a vehicle that never expected to be told no. The doors didn't open. They exploded outward. First came the man from the back seat, tall, square-jawed, wearing a leather jacket tight enough to prove a point. He had the body of someone who trained for aesthetics, not for longevity. Second came the bulkier one, neck thick as a fence post, arms straining against his sleeves, the kind of man you hire when you don't know the difference between strength and intimidation. Then the driver stepped out, salt and pepper hair, polo shirt tucked into expensive slacks, gold watch, wedding ring, the husband. Karen practically sprinted to him. "David!" she cried. "They're still doing it. They're tearing down our house." He looked at me like a man deciding which wall to punch through first. "You the one?" he said, stepping closer. "Are you the idiot who thinks he can destroy private property and get away with it?" I didn't move. "I'm the owner of this land," I said. "And I'm the one correcting an illegal structure sitting half a mile inside my boundary." Karen jabbed a finger at me. "He assaulted me verbally. He threatened me." He, he demolished our home like a lunatic, Joe muttered under his breath. Lady, that deck attacked itself. But the tall security guy didn't wait for explanations. He closed the distance in 4 strides and shoved me, hard. I stumbled back a step, boots sliding on gravel. Tom was off his machine before my heels touched the ground. In one fluid motion, he stepped between us, one hand out, palm open. Not happening, he said, voice level. The bulkier guy stepped up to Tom, chest puffed, fists curled. Karen screamed, "Don't let them touch me! This is our property!" David glared at me, face flushing red. "You're done," he growled. "You hear me? Done. You think you can bully my wife?" I straightened, dusted off my shirt, and spoke evenly. "You're trespassing on my land. Your men just initiated physical contact. You're escalating a situation already under legal documentation." He blinked, not because he understood, but because he hated how calm I was. Security guy number 1 lunged again. This time Joe dropped from his excavator like he was stepping out of a bar fight he'd been waiting for. The man charged. Joe didn't punch, didn't kick. He simply absorbed the impact and locked the man's arm in a hold, twisting until the man choked out a surprised grunt. Tom moved on the second guy, intercepting him with a block that looked impossibly efficient. Military training buried under decades of quiet living. Then chaos began. Not Hollywood chaos. Real chaos. Messy, clumsy, fueled by ego and bad timing. Gravel kicked up, dust swirled. Karen screamed in 3 different pitches. David yelled legal terms he didn't understand. Ellie never stopped recording. "Keep the drone on the overhead view," I told her between breaths. "Get angles of initiation. Don't miss anything." She nodded, switching viewpoints with the calm precision of a surgeon. Security guy number 1 landed a wild swing at Joe's shoulder. Joe answered by locking him down again, arms like iron gates. Security guy number 2 tried to push past Tom. Tom, calm as a monk, pinned him against a half-collapsed railing. David took a swing at me. I stepped aside, letting his momentum carry him into a pile of shingles. He hit the ground hard, cursing through teeth full of dust. Karen shrieked, "Did you see that? He attacked my husband!" Ellie zoomed in on David sprawled on the ground. "He tripped," she narrated dryly. "I have it on 3 angles." The situation tipped, not toward violence, but toward exhaustion. Everyone realized just how foolish this all looked, except Karen. She was desperate now, pacing, screaming fragments of words, fumbling through her purse until she yanked out a folder. The moment she pulled it free, my instincts sharpened. Paper, contracts, too clean. "Look!" she shouted, thrusting it toward me, toward the drone, toward anyone who would take it. "Here's the agreement. Here's proof. He signed this." She shoved the papers into my chest. I let them hit me, then held them carefully between 2 fingers. Ellie zoomed in. The drone hovered above with a soft buzz. I didn't even need to open it fully before seeing the problem. Karen kept screaming, "See? This is legal! This proves everything!" I turned the page over. Laser-printed signature, my signature, pulled from a public document, stretched to fit. Not a single stroke of actual ink. Forgery. David staggered upright behind us, brushing dirt off his shirt. Karen thrust her chin up defiantly. "There," she said. "Now what do you have to say for yourself?" I let the camera see the page clearly before I answered. "Just this," I said. "This signature was scanned from Deed Book 12, page 405. It's not original. It's not wet ink. It's a digital cut and paste." I held it toward the drone. "And you just handed it to me voluntarily. On camera." Karen's face drained, completely. Even the wind seemed to stop. Tom released his hold. Joe stepped back. The security men froze. David stared at his wife like she'd just set fire to their bank account. And then, in the distance, sirens, 3 of them, coming fast, coming hard, coming straight for the ridge. Ellie looked at me. "You ready?" she asked. I exhaled. "I was ready the moment they broke ground," I said. Sirens in the mountains sound different. They echo, rolling through the timber and bouncing off the ridge like a warning carried on the wind. By the time the first sheriff cruiser climbed into the clearing, the dust from the scuffle was still hanging in the air, drifting between us like leftover smoke from a brush pile. 3 vehicles parked in a clean stagger, not rushed, not chaotic. This was a department that handled emergencies without losing its pulse. Deputy Miller stepped out first. A tall man in his 50s, shoulders broad, jaw set, eyes steady. He wasn't a hothead. He wasn't a negotiator. He was the kind who showed up, looked, listened, and made a call without theatrics. He scanned the whole scene, the half-collapsed illegal cottage, the excavators idling quietly, the Tahoe with its doors still open, Karen nearly vibrating with outrage, David brushing dirt from his shirt with wounded pride, the two hired muscle guys suddenly less brave, and Ellie's drone hanging in the air like a silent officer. Then he looked at me. "Morning, Mark," he said. "Morning, Deputy," I replied. Karen rushed toward him like salvation had arrived. "Officer, arrest them! All of them!" she shrieked, pointing wildly. "They attacked us! They tore down our home! They—" Deputy Miller lifted a single hand. Not rude, just enough to reclaim control of the air. "Ma'am, you're going to need to slow down." "Slow down? They ambushed us. They assaulted my husband. They destroyed everything we—" He didn't answer her. He turned to me instead. "Your side?" I gestured toward Ellie. "We have full documentation. Drone footage, ground-level footage, GPS overlays, parcel data, evidence of trespass, evidence of unpermitted construction, and," I held up a sealed evidence sleeve, "a contract Mrs. Whitmore handed me voluntarily." Karen gasped. "That is my legal agreement." Deputy Miller took the sleeve. He tilted it slightly toward the light, just enough to see what he needed. No theatrics, no CSI lab talk, just a seasoned officer reading a page. He said, calmly and plainly, "It's flat on the paper, ma'am. No indentation at all. This looks like a high-res photocopy, not an original signature." Karen's eyes darted. Too fast. David's jaw tightened. Ellie zoomed in with the drone. Deputy Miller slipped the page back into the sleeve and sealed it. His tone stayed even, but firmer. "If you're claiming this as a binding contract, we'll need to see the original ink version, not a printed reproduction." Karen opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. No script left to read. David stepped forward, trying to recover the narrative. "Officer, this man ambushed us. We were defending ourselves." Deputy Miller raised the same calm hand. "We're going to review the footage." He nodded to Ellie. "You said you have timestamps?" "Yes, sir," Ellie said, handing him the controller. "Overhead first, then ground view." The deputy watched. He didn't react quickly or dramatically. He watched like a man who had learned that evidence always speaks louder than people. He saw, security guy in a 1 shoved me first. Security guy in a 2 charged Tom. David tripping into shingles untouched. Karen contradicting herself. And finally, Karen forcing the forged contract into my hands. He exhaled slowly. Then he turned to Karen. "Ma'am, this footage does not support your version of events." Karen flailed her hands. "The drone is fake. They altered it. This is manipulated," Ellie said quietly. "Live feed, deputy. Metadata intact." Deputy Miller nodded once. Karen spun toward him again. "You're letting them frame us." He straightened. "Ma'am, I'm not letting anyone do anything. I'm reviewing evidence. That's my job." Silence fell, heavy, like a door shutting. Finally he spoke. "No arrests on scene. This is now both a civil and potentially criminal matter. I'm forwarding all of this to the district attorney's office. There will be follow-up." Karen gasped as though someone had punched the air out of her. "What? After everything he destroyed?" "Ma'am," Miller said steadily, "that's the procedure." He turned to me. "Mark, I recommend suspending demolition until the DA reviews all this." "I'll comply," I said, "because compliance is a weapon too." Karen snarled, "You think this is over? I'll have every agency in this state crawling over your property, every one of them." I didn't respond, but Ellie did, her voice soft, precise. "The drone heard that too, Karen." Karen froze, and in her eyes I saw it, that flicker of panic that makes people do stupid, desperate things. 24 hours later, the EPA came knocking. The knock on my workshop door came early. Too early for visitors, too measured for neighbors, and too official to ignore. 3 quick raps, a pause, then 2 more, government rhythm. I wiped my hands on a shop rag, expecting maybe a delivery driver or a lost hiker. But when I opened the door, 2 men in windbreakers stood on the gravel, dark blue jackets, shoulder patches, badges clipped to their belts. EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. The taller one adjusted his glasses and then held up a folder. "Sir," he said, "we received an anonymous complaint regarding potential hazardous waste dumping on this parcel." My stomach didn't drop. It twisted. Anonymous complaint. Right after Karen threatened to unleash every agency she knew. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "What kind of waste?" The man opened the folder. "Insulation debris, unsealed solvents, drywall dust, potentially contaminated materials." He glanced up. "We're obligated to investigate." Ellie appeared behind me, still tying her hair back. "What territory?" she asked. The agent pointed to a marked map. "The ridge, area where a structure was recently demolished." Of course. Of course she picked the one spot where we'd been hours before, where the ground was still disturbed, where debris from their illegal build could be moved in without us noticing. I exhaled slowly. "All right," I said. "You're free to inspect, but you're going to want your cameras running." The agent blinked. "Sir? We've had activity here recently. I want documentation of your documentation." His partner gave a cautious nod. "Fair enough." We led them up the ridge. The early morning sun cut sharp lines through the trees, illuminating the path like a stage set. And at the clearing, the theater continued. Black bags, broken drywall, a few tipped-over buckets. A barrel tucked behind a pine like someone tried to hide it, but gave up halfway. Ellie whispered, "This is staged." I didn't whisper back. I crouched near a pile of drywall. The edges were too clean, too straight. Cut by a shop blade, not ripped by a machine. The EPA agent knelt beside me. "Sir, did you or anyone working under you leave this material here?" "No." "Can you prove that?" Ellie lifted the drone controller. "Yes," she said. "We have continuous footage from demolition yesterday. There was no debris of this type on site." I pointed at the ground. "And footprints. These aren't ours. Wrong boot size." The agent looked uneasy. "Still," he said, "we have to collect samples, and we may need to issue a preliminary violation until this is resolved." There it was, the dagger Karen wanted. Not a conviction, not even a fine, but a federal cloud over my name. I didn't argue. Arguing makes you sloppy. Procedure makes you lethal. So I simply said, "Do what you need to do. We'll cooperate." Ellie filmed everything. The agents bagged samples, shot photos, marked coordinates. Then, halfway through the process, a truck engine growled up the ridge. Tom. He stepped out slowly, walking stiff from the scuffle the day before, carrying a metal case under one arm. "You're going to want to see something," he said. The EPA agents turned. "And you are?" one asked. "Retired structural inspector," Tom replied, not bothering with a handshake. "And the guy who knows when he's looking at a setup." He popped open the case. Inside was a small hard drive and a folded map. "This," he said, "came from Phil's trail cam over the East Ridge." He handed the drive to Ellie, who connected it to her tablet. A grainy black and white video appeared. Midnight, a large SUV backing into the woods. Same model as Karen's husband's Tahoe, same roof rack, same dents under the bumper. Two figures stepping out, carrying bags, hauling construction debris, offloading barrels. The timestamp was unmistakable. The EPA agent leaned closer to the screen. "Why didn't you show us this earlier?" I shrugged lightly. "You hadn't asked." Ellie paused the video at the clearest frame. A man lifting a bag from the trunk. His hoodie read, "El Calo HOA, big enough for anyone to read." The EPA agents exchanged a look. One part frustration, one part dawning realization. Tom crossed his arms. "You were about to issue a violation," he said, "for trash that wasn't here until after dark." The lead agent exhaled heavily. "Sir, we're going to need copies of this footage." "You'll have it by noon," Ellie said. "And," the agent added, "we'll be filing a report, but not against you." I raised an eyebrow. "Against who?" The agent closed his folder. "The party responsible for falsifying an environmental complaint and illegal dumping of construction waste. That's a federal offense." Somewhere in my chest, a knot loosened. Not victory, not yet, but momentum. As we walked back down toward the workshop, Tom patted my shoulder. "She picked the wrong mountain, Mark," Ellie smirked. "And the wrong lawyer." I nodded. But inside I felt something else. Not anger, not relief. Focus. Because the next step wasn't about debris or drones or forged contracts. It was about intent. And intent, in court, is what buries people. The morning after the EPA left, the ridge felt different. Not calmer, not lighter, just coiled, like the air itself was waiting for the next move. Ellie was already at the kitchen table when I came down, laptop open, glasses low on her nose. Her coffee sat untouched, turning cold while she worked. She was building something more formidable than a case. She was building inevitability. Folders were laid out with military precision. Screenshots clipped and labeled. GPS overlays aligned perfectly. Drone angles frozen mid-air with timestamp markers. A dozen headings typed in her neat, controlled font. Trespass timber damage. Old growth. Unpermitted structure. Assault. Initiation, forgery, contract. EPA false report. Illegal dumping. Federal. I leaned over her shoulder. You prepping for trial? I said. Or founding a new religion? She didn't look up. A religion lets you repent, she replied. A courtroom doesn't. Around 9:15, Tom arrived carrying a thick envelope and the same metal case from yesterday. He pushed the door open with his elbow because his hands were full. County office opens at 10, he said. Figured you'd want to see the autopsy report before I file it. He laid the documents out on the table, piece by piece. Structural diagrams, soil tests, load calculations. His handwriting was tight and unforgiving, like he was writing on stone tablets. It wasn't just shoddy construction, it was criminal negligence dressed up as a weekend getaway. Shallow footings poured on uncompacted soil. No rebar reinforcement whatsoever. The deck ledger bolted wrong. So wrong it was practically a death sentence. Roof load exceeding safety limits by nearly 30%. The entire house sitting on unstable grade. Tom tapped a specific point on the drawing. One good snowfall, and this thing snaps clean off the slope. Anyone standing under the deck wouldn't have a chance. Ellie looked up long enough to say, and they plan to blame us for the collapse. That's the part that sticks. Tom nodded. Which is why I'm filing this with the county engineers and sending a copy to the DA. They don't like it when amateurs build grenades. Around 10:40, a white sedan turned into our driveway. The county courier stepped out carrying a stack of envelopes banded together like a bundle of bad news. He didn't have to say anything. You can feel a summons through paper. I handed one to Ellie, one to Tom just to hold, and opened mine. Destruction of property, assault, harassment, emotional distress. Intentional sabotage. They'd thrown the entire kitchen sink in, hoping at least one accusation would stick. Ellie read hers silently, eyes narrowing just slightly. They're leaning on emotion, she said, not evidence. Tom snorted. Desperation never looks good in print. The afternoon passed in steady preparation. Ellie cataloged every clip, tagged every file, added officer statements, EPA notes, and timestamps from the trail cam footage Tom brought yesterday. The porch table slowly transformed into a war map, not of land, of law. By sunset, everything was ready. The last folder slid shut. Ellie set her laptop aside and stretched her fingers. Excavators knock down walls, she said. Paperwork knocks down entire careers. Tom laughed, shaking his head. You two are terrifying. I stepped out onto the porch, looking toward the ridge where the illegal cottage once stood. A quiet patch of dirt now. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like the prologue to something bigger. Then it happened. A soft chime. Ping. Ellie frowned and pulled her laptop back onto her lap. That's strange, she murmured. I wasn't expecting anything. She clicked her inbox. One new message, no subject line. Sender, board.member@privatemail.com. My eyebrows lifted. A whistleblower? I asked. Ellie opened the message, and the change in her posture was immediate. Her back straightened, her jaw set, her eyes sharpened like a lens snapping into focus. Mark, she whispered, you need to see this. It was an email chain, long, messy, and devastating, between Karen the contractor and two HOA board members. Karen, just build it. Don't worry about the boundary. Another line. If he complains, the HOA reserve fund will cover legal. He can't fight us, not with our budget. The contractor replied, we're definitely outside the platted HOA zone. Karen, he doesn't check the ridge often. Get it done fast. Another board member hesitated. Are you sure? This feels risky, Karen responded. He lives up there alone. He won't push back, and even if he does, we'll bury him in motions. Ellie scrolled further. Attached was a PDF, proposed expansion plan, Phase 2, multiple cottages, extended road access, all drawn directly across our land. Tom let out a low whistle. "This isn't negligence," he said. "This is malice." Ellie's voice was almost quiet enough to be a whisper. "This is intent, Mark. The one thing judges care about more than anything else." Everything in me went still, not angry, not relieved, just certain. Karen hadn't made a mistake. She hadn't misread a map. She hadn't been misled. She had planned this, counted on us folding, counted on HOA money to crush whoever stood in her way. And now, a member of her own board had stabbed her in the back to save themselves. The wind outside shifted, bending the pines. The ridge seemed to exhale. Ellie closed the laptop slowly. "Well," she said, voice steady as a hammer, "I think we just won the pre-trial." I didn't smile. I didn't need to. The evidence would speak for us tomorrow, and Karen would finally hear exactly what it sounded like when the truth landed. The courtroom was colder than it looked. Old wood, old air, old expectations. Ellie and I sat shoulder to shoulder at the defense table, not touching, but aligned the way two mountain ridges hold the same horizon. Karen entered behind her lawyer, wrapped in black like a widow grieving a future she still hoped the judge would restore. David followed, looking like a man who'd bargained with the wrong devil and was now realizing the bill had come due. When the judge walked in, the room straightened itself. Small woman, sharp eyes, the kind who didn't need to raise her voice to quiet a room. Words obeyed her simply because she spoke them. Karen's attorney rose first. He launched into a long, winding monologue about innocence, community vision, emotional trauma, reckless destruction, cruelty, intimidation, violence. He painted Karen as a martyr and me as a barbarian with a bulldozer. The judge listened, but not deeply. You can tell by a judge's eyes when the words are landing and when they're just passing through the room like steam. He finished. Karen nodded and dabbed her cheek with the corner of a neatly folded tissue. Then the judge turned to our table. "Your response?" I didn't look at the attorney we hired to sit quietly and keep things procedural. I stood. "Your Honor," I said, "I am representing myself. Mrs. Hale will facilitate the exhibits." A flicker passed through her eyes, recognition, then something firmer. "Proceed, Mr. Hale." I stepped to the podium with no notes. Not because I memorized anything, because truth doesn't need memorizing. "Exhibit A," I began. "Parcel maps, GIS overlays, and my deed. The plaintiffs built their structure entirely on my land." Ellie clicked the first slide. The boundaries lit up on the monitor like a wound with clean edges. "Exhibit B," I continued. "Drone documentation of the structure, including evidence of timber trespass, 3 old-growth oaks cut without permit." Ellie brought up the footage. The room stayed silent, the way a room does when everyone sees the truth at the same time. "Exhibit C, initiation of physical contact." The video played, security guy in a 1 shoving me first, security guy in a 2 swinging at Tom, David tripping over shingles without a finger laid on him. Karen stiffened. I didn't stop. "Exhibit D, the contract Mrs. Whitmore presented as evidence I had approved her construction." The clerk handed the judge the sleeve. "No ink indentation," I said. "No stroke variance. High-resolution reproduction of my deed signature. Forgery." The judge examined it. Her jaw shifted. Karen's attorney sank lower in his seat. "Exhibit E," I said. "EPA's preliminary report stating the debris at the site did not originate from us." Ellie handed the paperwork forward. "Exhibit F, trail cam footage showing the plaintiffs transporting and dumping construction waste on our ridge in the middle of the night." The video froze with the HOA hoodie perfectly visible. Karen's attorney whispered something harsh to her, but she avoided his eyes. I waited for the room to breathe before continuing. "Exhibit G, internal HOA emails submitted anonymously by a board member." Ellie clicked open the chain. I read them aloud, one by one. "Just build it. Don't worry about the boundary." Karen flinched. "If he complains, HOA reserve fund will cover legal. He can't fight us." David closed his eyes. "Get it done fast. He doesn't check the ridge often." Finally. "He lives up there alone. Even if he pushes back, we'll bury him in motions." The courtroom was silent in a way that felt physical, like the air grew heavier to trap the moment where everything changed. I closed the binder. No further defense, Your Honor. Then I returned to my seat, not triumphantly, not smugly, just with the certainty of a man who had carried the truth to the finish line. The judge leaned back, removed her glasses, and looked directly at Curran. "Mrs. Whitmore," she began. Her voice was not loud. It didn't have to be. "In 20 years on this bench, I have seen honest mistakes. I have seen negligence. I have even seen ignorance, but I rarely see such a calculated, malicious attempt to weaponize the legal system against a private citizen." Karen shrank into her chair. "Your claims are dismissed with prejudice," the judge continued. "That means you may not file them again." Her attorney rubbed his forehead. "Furthermore," the judge said, turning another page, "given the overwhelming evidence of forgery, perjury, and intentional misuse of HOA funds, I am referring this transcript and all exhibits to the district attorney for criminal review." Karen's face collapsed. David's turned gray. The judge picked up her gavel. "Judgment for the defendant," she declared. "Full legal fees awarded." Then she paused, looked at me, and added, "And Mr. Hale." I met her eyes. "Yes, Your Honor. Thank you for removing that structure before it killed someone." The gavel struck like a rifle shot. "Court adjourned," Karen sobbed. Her attorney gathered papers with trembling hands. David stared at the floor like he hoped it would open and swallow him. Ellie closed her binder. Tom nodded once. And I felt something I hadn't felt since this began. Not victory, just peace. The kind that comes only when the truth wins in daylight. The air outside the courthouse felt different at the moment we stepped out. Not lighter, not louder, just honest, for the first time in weeks. Karen didn't rush out behind us. She didn't storm or scream. She shuffled, supported by her husband, looking like a woman who had finally realized the mountain she was climbing wasn't mine. It was justice. Her attorney avoided her eyes. He carried his briefcase loosely, as if it suddenly weighed too much. As we stepped off the courthouse steps, Ellie squeezed my hand once, quiet, firm. "That's it," she said. "You did it." "I didn't do it," I replied. "We did it." Tom joined us, tucking the folded structural report back into his case with the quiet satisfaction of a man who had spoken the truth out loud and been heard. But the story didn't end there, not even close. By evening, word had spread across Elk Hollow like sparks jumping between dry pine needles. The HOA board wasn't just shaken. They were in freefall. An emergency meeting was called before sunset. And according to 3 different neighbors who called Ellie within the hour, it wasn't a meeting at all. It was a revolt. Board members who had followed Karen out of fear for years were suddenly speaking openly, loudly, and with an exhaustion that sounded like relief. By 9 p.m., the official notice went out. Effective immediately, Karen Whitmore is removed from the presidency of the Elk Hollow HOA. Nothing about fraud, nothing about forged documents, nothing about dumping waste in the woods, but the absence of words said plenty. The next morning, the county followed with its own message, far shorter, far sharper. HOA jurisdiction does not extend beyond Ridgeline Road. Hale property is not under HOA governance. The map online updated instantly. A bold red line, clean as a blade, cut their world from mine. Ellie printed it, pinned it to the fridge, touched the corner like she might frame it someday. The district attorney moved quickly too. A formal inquiry was opened into forgery, perjury, illegal dumping, HOA fund misuse, conspiracy to commit property fraud. David voluntarily stepped away from his law firm pending investigation. Everyone knew what that meant. The 2 hired enforcers were picked up quietly. One apparently had a suspended license from a different assault case. This didn't help him now. But the part that surprised me most wasn't the legal fallout. It was the people. Neighbors I barely knew showed up, some with pie, some with beer, some with stories they had been afraid to tell before. An older woman hugged Ellie and whispered, "We were scared of her too." A man from the HOA side said, "I didn't vote for her. Wish I'd spoken up sooner." A younger couple simply left a handwritten note on our porch. "Thank you for standing your ground. You helped all of us." But the moment I knew things had truly changed came at the celebration Ellie insisted on planning. A simple gathering. No speeches, no decorations, just people and food and the quiet satisfaction of surviving a storm. We held it on the very clearing where the illegal cottage had once stood. The ground flat, open, and honest again. Tom brought ribs, Joe grilled sausages. Someone set up a portable speaker. Kids ran between tree shadows. The fire pit in the center glowed like a heartbeat returning to normal. And that's when he appeared. Deputy Miller, not in uniform, just jeans, boots, a casual shirt, and a paper plate holding 3 ribs like a peace offering. He stood beside me and Tom near the fire. "Good turnout," he said. "Good people," I replied. He nodded toward the flames, then lowered his voice. "Mark, the county's reviewing 3 other Elk Hollow projects down south. We're seeing the same pattern: cut corners, bad permits, boundary issues, real messy stuff." Tom let out a soft groan and bit into a rib. "Knew it," he muttered. "Do idiots travel in packs?" Deputy Miller smirked, then continued. "We might need outside help. A legal consultant who knows land law inside and out, and a structural guy who can spot a fraud foundation at 20 feet. Tom elbowed me slightly. "Depends on the pay rate," he said, chewing. I didn't answer immediately. I just stared into the fire, the embers rising, the sparks catching the breeze and drifting toward the tree line like small, glowing truths. "Let me think on it," I finally said. Miller nodded. "No rush," he murmured. "But this thing with Karen, it wasn't isolated. Some folks got real comfortable bending rules up here." He stepped away to join the food line. Tom watched him go, then shot me a sideways look. "You're not going to stay out of it," he said. "Not your style." I didn't argue, didn't need to. Sometimes the next chapter doesn't announce itself. It just pulls up a chair at your fire. The night deepened. The music softened. Stars pushed through the dark one by one. People laughed. Ellie moved from group to group, her smile warm and easy again. Kids toasted marshmallows near the coals. When she finally came to my side, she leaned her head against my shoulder. "Feels like the mountain can breathe again," she whispered. "Yeah," I said quietly. "Feels like it." She lifted her glass. "To standing your ground," she said, "and making damn sure no one builds on it but you." Everyone nearby echoed the toast. The fire cracked. The ridge hummed with night sounds. Owls, wind, and something softer beneath it. Peace. And somewhere in the dark woods, past where the illegal cottage once stood, the mountain listened and approved.